Coach, welcome to Crosswalk Talk. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's good to see you again.
We're talking to Coach Joe Kennedy, whose real life story is retold in the new movie. Average Joe comes out October the 11th. It's based on a book, of course. It stars Eric Close as Coach and Amy Acker as his wife, Denise. Let me give folks a plot summary, Coach, before we start talking here. The plot summary says a coach stands up for the right to pray, telling others that a childhood in foster care followed by 20 years in the Marine Corps prepared him for this legal battle. And my goodness, what a story, Coach. Of course, you were fired, and then you won a Supreme Court case that made national headlines. Coach, I guess the obvious question here is, why did you want your story told on the big screen? Some people would be hesitant to have that done. Why did you want to do it?
I'm still hesitant. I'm all about it. It seems really crazy and weird all at the same time, but it seemed there was just a bigger message, and God has something to say to the rest of the world and Americans to wake up and understand what their First Amendment means and their freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and the free exercise. If we don't exercise those, then we end up losing them. And we want everybody to understand that you have more religious liberty and freedoms today than we've had in the past 50 years. And it was somebody's big idea to tell the story. And here we are today. It's just crazy.
Tell me, take us back, because I'm not going to assume everybody has followed your case and the quote unquote controversy that out there. But what happened exactly? Were you you're obviously praying on the field, and then a controversy started. Take us back to how all this started, if you will.
Sure. I was in my eighth season, and at the beginning of even before I agreed to become a coach, that was my covenant with God. It was something simple, just to give Him the glory after every game, win or lose. Something very simple, and it was maybe a 30-second prayer after each game that we played, home and away. Went on for 8 years, and this was the kids wanted to know if they could come out, and of course I told them it was a free country, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. They wanted to know if they could invite the other team, and again, it's their team and they have the freedom, so they started inviting the other team. And in the last year, in our last season, we had all the teams in our league joining us on the 50-yard line. Now, somebody from another school district came and saw this after a great, fantastic game. Now, I hate to say we ended up losing, but we came together, and it was just a perfect moment of good sportsmanship and being thanks for being able to play the game. He felt compelled to call our principal at the high school and tell him, hey, I just went to a football game, and I got to tell you what your football program is doing is awesome. So everything started as a compliment, but he wanted to understand what we were doing and wanted to make sure we were following the guidelines of the school, the policy that says you cannot encourage nor discourage kids in prayer, which I didn't care if they came out or not. It was no big deal. So they started that. They started getting a little bit of feedback after it kind of hit the media, and they said, well, just stop praying with the students and everything should be fine. And I fully complied. I didn't care because it was unfortunate. This is what we got complimented for. But I said, this was my thing to begin with. So I just went back to praying by myself. Then somebody else raised a stink about it. Their lawyers thought better if I just completely stopped the prayer altogether and wanted me to go move somewhere else and pray where people couldn't see me. And that's how all of this really started and started the rub between myself and the school district.
So this began as a positive group prayer, and it ended up you can't even pray at all out there. That's kind of what happened, right?
Yes, sir.
Wow, that's amazing. So the movie depicts you and your wife kind of having some arguments about this. I mean, is that real life? Was there some tension in the home about what you were doing?
There was more than tension in the home. So my wife, this was such a huge thing for us. We had two of our kids, our kids were in the high school and one in the middle school. So this was something that was really close to home. And my wife was the human resource director for the school district. So you can imagine she was in the middle of all this, and she was getting it from both sides. And I couldn't talk to her. The school wouldn't talk to her. Everybody kind of just alienated her, and she was left all alone on an island all by herself. And we almost got divorced over this. She couldn't understand why this was so important to me. And how do you explain that? I'm a Marine, I'm an American, and the First Amendment means the world to me. And she asked me one day, she said, what's more important, our marriage or this fight? And we were going to end up splitting up over it. And thank God that he came through right at the last second. But we had some intense fellowship over the years, if you can imagine. And we had a lot of dark times over the years.
So what was that? Was there a turning point, or was it a gradual process of you guys seeing eye to eye?
It was a definite turning point. It was like a flip of a card. If you're familiar with Facing the Giants, the movie from the Kendrick brothers, they're the ones that got me into praying or into coaching and praying. I stole it from their movie. So that's how that all started. Well, here you fast forward that to, I don't know, it must have been 2 or 3 years into the law or the case, and we've lost a couple different times at different court levels.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we were ready to split up. I was getting ready to walk out the door, and I got a video from the Kendrick brothers standing on the 50-yard line where they filmed Facing the Giants. And he said, Coach, I know you and your wife are going through some hard times right now, and I just want to encourage you. I fell out. I fell down the stairs. My wife came running out, and we ended up sitting there watching the video and just honestly, we just cried in each other's arms for about an hour. And it was just instantly where the blinders came off of her. And she understood that this was more than just the rebellious kid she grew up with. And she understood from a God aspect of it. And her eyes were just so open. And instantly we were healed, where two became one. And it was just an amazing miracle right at the perfect second.
Okay, just let me ask you one follow-up question. Are you saying the Kendricks personally sent you a video, or they posted something on social media for everybody to see?
They personally sent me a video, which
Wow.
blew my mind. I don't even know how they got my number, but I tell you, you can't even make that up. Where I'm walking out of the house for us to take a separation from each other, and I get that right at that moment. So yeah, that was
That's
just incredible.
wow. That's a divine moment, definitely. How did the community react around you? I know you had a lot of support, but I mean, were there some dissenters in the community that pretty much hated you?
Oh, of course. And there was even people on our coaching staff, and I even had one parent of a kid on my team that was against me. But overall, we were, man, it was probably about 98% people positive. But of course, you're going to have that 1 or 2% that are going to come against you no matter what you're doing. And they came in force. They actually had the satanic group show up at one of our football games, dressed out in their black robes, goat horns, makeup on their face. It's worth Googling. It's quite a show.
Of course, you went up to the Supreme Court. That was a big deal nationwide. I'm curious, what were your lawyers telling you and your attorneys telling you leading up to that moment at the Supreme Court? Were they optimistic that you would win there?
We were really optimistic about the Supreme Court, all the lower courts, because this was held over on the West Coast. So you can imagine that the court systems over there are just a little bit different than anywhere else in the United States. And they said, it's going to be a fight. You'll probably lose. And I couldn't understand how I was going to lose at any level. If they just looked at the facts of the case and bounced it off the Constitution, it made absolutely perfect sense. This was such a simple thing. I don't, to this day, I cannot understand. It was a 30-second prayer alone on a football field. That's been going on from the beginning of time. But God had other plans. He had something to say. My lawyer said, you just got to stick with the fight. And when we got to the Supreme Court, we knew that finally there was going to be a court that was supposed to be impartial. They were going to look at the facts of the case, and they were going to bounce it nothing but off the Constitution, not off of any kind of political party or any of that other nonsense or bias. It was supposed to be purely where justice is blind and measures out the case.
Yeah, I think the founding fathers definitely would have supported you in this fight, sir. Of course, the movie also just talks about your background. You were a Marine for 20 years. Why did you join the Marines? What inspired you to join the Marines?
I was a terror of a kid. I was horrible. I don't know how to put that any other way. I was in the most trouble. I got kicked out of every school I ever went to. I was in group homes, foster homes, boys' homes. And I had people telling me that only thing I ever contributed to society was pain. And it struck me hard as a kid. And I didn't want to be defined by my past. I always thought that I could become something and I wanted to prove that, but I didn't know how to do that. And since I love fighting so much, the Marine Corps seemed like the perfect deal for me. I ended up getting my diploma so I could go into the Marine Corps, and I found the discipline and team building and really found a family and a love of our country. And I became something bigger than myself. And man, it saved my life. Let me tell you.
Amen. At what point did you find faith then? Was it during that time or was it after?
No, it was after I grew up in a Catholic church, and there was always that you have God in the background. I When I was at boys' homes, they always planted seeds and tried to show me the light, and it went on some solid ground and some hard rocks up here for the longest time. It wasn't until I was retiring from the Marine Corps when I met my well rejoined with my childhood sweetheart and we got married. It wasn't until then, when I was failing as a husband, did I actually finally surrender to the Lord, because I was failing as a husband. And I said, God, you give me my wife, I'll give you my life. And he took me up on it. So I was what, 38 years old and out of the Marine Corps by the time that God got a hold of me.
Let's catch people up on what you're doing now. You are no longer coaching at that school. You're now living in Florida, and you're spreading the message of this movie and of your book. Kind of just tell us what you're doing now, if you will.
Sure. I went back to the high school and tried to make that work. And you can imagine there was probably some hurt feelings and things weren't working out well. And I thought it was best that for everybody, if I just walked away and resigned, and I was perfectly fine with that, especially since we moved down to Pensacola, Florida to take care of my wife's dad, who's ailing and not doing well. So that worked out really good. Now I just go around the country wherever I'm called, and I just try to spread the message of encouragement for people in their marriages, in their social life, in their schools, in their communities, and really stand up for what is right and to do the right thing.
Amen. How do you want this movie to impact people? The movie is Average Joe, comes out October the 11th. What do you want moviegoers to be thinking about as they walk away?
I think it's pretty simple that life is not a bed of roses. It's going to be hard and it's going to have rough times. And we don't try to hide any of that. We try to show true to life. And they did a great job at really complementing our story and our life. And when people walk away, they could say, you know, if this guy could change the nation with this as a simple act of faith, imagine what we could do as a country. So I hope people walk away inspired and ready to stand up and fight and be bold in their faith and be bold as Americans, especially in this election year where people seem to just hide when things get tough instead of standing out and being bold in their faith.
I'm assuming the phrase "Average Joe" means something to you. Then, what is? Because that's kind of, what you answered is kind of a description of Average Joe, is it not?
Yeah, well, I wanted something that described me, and they wouldn't go for below average Joe. So we settled on the halfway in between. They had all these other big headline names that the think tanks put together, and none of it said who I was. And I couldn't think of anything simpler to explain and describe myself than just average.
Yeah, and that's all it takes to change a country and to change the world. Are average people coming together to do the right thing. That's what you're saying.
Amen. You got
Amen to
it.
that. We've been speaking to Coach Joe Kennedy. His story is told in the movie Average Joe, which is based on the book Average Joe. Comes out October the 11th. Coach, thank you so much.
God bless you, brother. I can't wait to talk to you again.